we should start our recording. Welcome, everybody. Here we are on the first day of winter, shortest day of the year. Everything's going to be peachy from now on, longer days. So what I'd like to do tonight is to finish the class on Ken Wilber, the Buddhist. And then there's a chance we might even start the sixth one. We'll see how it goes. So you'll remember that we talked about an experience that Wilber had that lasted 11 days where he didn't lose consciousness for 1 minute in that whole period. And he tells us that he had retained that consciousness when he was his body was sleeping, during dreams, and in deep formless sleep. And then when he woke up, he was fully aware of all the changes that were occurring. So I'd like to dwell a little longer on Wilber's experience of his Buddha nature, which is what it really was that he was experiencing. He had, after all, attained the primary goal of Buddhism. Plus, he explains his experience with exceptional clarity, almost matter-of-factly. In the process, he sheds considerable light on the central theme of our Arc of Ascent course. Wilber informs us that it typically takes many years of meditation to stabilize this constant consciousness through all the stages of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. In his own particular case, it took 25 years. So I'm just going to pick up on our list from where we were last time. I think it's probably Jack's turn to read, and I'd ask him to read number 11 for us.
The signs of constant consciousness are simple. You are conscious during the waking state, and then, as you fall asleep and start to dream, you still remain conscious of the dreaming. This is similar to lucid dreaming, but with a slight difference. Usually in lucid dreaming, you start to manipulate the dream. You choose to dream of sex orgies or great food or flying over mountains or whatnot. But with constant witnessing consciousness, there is no desire to change anything that arises. You simply and innocently witness it. It's a choiceless awareness, a mirror-like awareness, which equally and impartially reflects whatever arises. So you remain conscious during the dream state, witnessing it, not changing it, although you can if you want. Usually you don't want. Ken Wilber, One Taste, March 8, page 55.
Great, thank you. So Wilber has chosen to call this Pellucid Dreaming instead of lucid dreaming. He also refers to Pellucid Deep Sleep, or tacit witnessing in the deep dreamless state. Now, this next one that Joey, I hope, will read is a continuation of the passage that Jack just finished.
Reading 11 continued. Then, as you pass into deep sleep, you still remain conscious. But now you are aware of nothing but vast, pure emptiness, with no content whatsoever. But aware of is not quite right, since there is no duality here. It is more like there is simply pure consciousness itself, without quality or contents or subjects or objects. A vast, pure emptiness that is not nothing, but is still unqualifiable. Then, as you come out of the deep sleep state, you see the mind and the dream state arise and take form. That is, out of casual emptiness.
That's causal.
That is, out of causal emptiness, there arises the subtle mind, dreams, images, symbols, concepts, visions, forms, and you witness this emergence. The dream state continues for a while, and then as you begin to wake up, you can see the entire gross realm, the physical realm, your body, the bed, the room, the physical universe, nature arises directly out of the subtle mind state. Ken Wilber, One Taste.
So, in other words, you've just taken a tour of the whole great chain of being, gross body to subtle mind to causal spirit, in both its ascending and descending movements. As you may recall, Sri Aurobindo referred to these as evolution and involution. So let's take a look at that little graphic I've created. So evolution, which is the ascent up the arc, is your gross body or waking body. Sorry, your gross body waking up to subtle mind, which is dreaming, and then going to causal emptiness or deep sleep. And then involution is the reverse process. So he makes the point that everybody goes through this cycle every 24 hours. Those who have reached enlightenment remain aware during all these changes of state, including deep sleep. So that's all that really distinguishes them from us. Is it worth it, I wonder? 25 years of meditation to get to that state. Clearly, Buddhism thinks it is. The key is to break the hold of the ego, since it barely exists in the subtle state and does not exist at all in the causal state of emptiness. By identifying with constant consciousness, you cease to identify with the ego. Rather, you identify with pure formless consciousness itself, which is colorless, spaceless, timeless, and formless. By identifying with nothing in particular, you can embrace absolutely everything that arises. By transcending the ego, you are one with the all. Bill, would you consider reading number 13 for us, please?
You still have complete access to the waking state ego, but you are no longer only that. Rather, the very deepest part of you is one with the entire cosmos in all its radiant glory. You simply are everything that is arising moment to moment. You do not see the sky. You are the sky. You do not touch the earth. You are the earth. You do not hear the rain. You are the rain. You and universe are what the mystics call one taste.
Thank you. So, by the way, Wilber suggests that we be careful about how we describe people who have become aware of their Buddha nature. Let me see. Lisa, it's just a short one, number 14.
We do not meditate to attain Buddha nature because, being ever present, it is literally unattainable. Rather, we meditate to express the Buddha nature that we always already are.
This is a very important point. Most of us have that feeling that we're on the path to somewhere different from where we are at the moment. But he's saying, no, it's here with you right now.
Right.
That's the one that thinks they're going on a journey. But you're only going to arrive back at yourself. So I thought we might take a look at this in relation to the 4 quadrants. All the experiences that Wilber has just described concerning the expansion of consciousness occurred within the upper left quadrant in his model, the interior realm of the individual. One of his most important discoveries is that developments in one quadrant are directly related to developments in the other 3 quadrants. As he is fond of saying, they tetra-evolve. 4 of them evolve at the same time in lockstep. Consequently, there must be evidence of this expansion of consciousness in the other quadrants. So for now, let's limit our investigation to the upper right quadrant, which is the exterior realm of the individual. So just to remind you, you'll remember that the upper 2 quadrants refer to the individual, while the lower 2 quadrants pertain to the collective. Similarly, the 2 quadrants on the left detail the interior dimensions of us, while the 2 right-hand quadrants articulate the exterior dimensions. And that's neatly captured in this diagram. So in the spring of 1997, Wilbur was visited by a group of university students interested in his work. One of these was a young man training to be a psychiatrist. He refused to believe that meditation could dramatically alter brain waves. When he learned that Wilbur had created videotapes of himself meditating while hooked up to an EEG machine, he asked to see one. The machine shows alpha, beta, theta, and delta waves in both left and right hemispheres of the brain. So here they are. Alpha is where we are probably at the moment. Awake, but relaxed, I hope. Beta is when you're really, well, maybe this is where we are. Intensely thinking, analyzing, you know. But in both cases, we're in the gross realm of waking consciousness, and it's our ego involved. Now, when we are sleeping or trying to sleep, this is theta is something that occurs during the dream state, but sometimes in states of intense creativity while you're awake. And there you're accessing the subtle realm, and it's probably your soul that's involved. Delta, on the other hand, is normally produced only in deep dreamless sleep. That's the causal realm, and it's the spirit that's being touched there. So, Ingrid, I wonder if you could start us off with number 15, and then we'll ask Lori to read number 16.
The video starts with me hooked up to the machine. I am in normal waking consciousness. So you can see a lot of alpha and beta activity in both hemispheres. But you can also see a large amount of delta waves. In both hemispheres, the delta indicators are at maximum, presumably because of constant or stable witnessing. I then attempt to go into a type of nirvikalpa samadhi, or complete mental cessation. And within 4 or 5 seconds, all of the machine's indicators go completely to 0. It looks like whoever this is totally brain dead. There is no alpha, no beta, no theta, but there is still maximum delta. And that's from Ken Wilber, One Taste, April 10th of 1997.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lori.
Reading 15 continued. After several minutes of this, I start doing a type of mantra visualization technique, yidam meditation, which I've always maintained is predominantly a subtle level practice. And sure enough, large amounts of theta waves immediately show up on the machine, along with maximum delta. The fact that theta, which normally occurs only in dreaming, and delta, which normally occurs in deep sleep, are both being produced in a wide-awake subject, tends to indicate a type of simultaneous presence of gross, subtle, and causal states. It is, in any event, attention grabbing.
So one of the people on that occasion watching the video was Sam Burkholz, who was Wilbur's publisher at Shambhala Publications. He criticized Wilbur for being so self-serving, so braggadocio. Wilbur replied with, probably so, but to me, it's an objective event. Too bad the test subject isn't somebody else, because the results are striking to the average viewer. It really gets their attention, and much more than my books do. What Wilbur is doing here is correlating the upper left quadrant, in other words, states and levels of consciousness, with the upper right quadrant, the objective brain. He is thus able to demonstrate that there really are distinctively different brainwave patterns for different types and levels of meditation. People tend to get very serious about meditation after seeing this tape because it shows them that there is truly something profound going on here. The primordial awareness is not just an idea you memorize, but the result of actual practice that truly changes your very makeup. It encourages them to take up an authentic spiritual practice in order to eventually follow the current of constant consciousness through all three states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, thus finding that constant ray of spirit that speaks to each and all in no uncertain terms, which we normally don't hear or recognize. Wilbur's point, obviously, is that it's essential to practice. Thinking and reading will only alter alpha and beta states, which are part of the gross realm. He argues that deep meditative practice will take people into theta, the subtle realm, and delta, the causal realm. Over time, constant consciousness will persist throughout all three states. Quote, wherein the ground of all three states, non-dual spirit itself, will become as obvious as a glass of cold water thrown in your original face. So maybe we should pause there and have a bit of a confab about that. I've thrown a lot of fairly high-level material at you just now. Has anybody had this experience before?
Meryl has her hand up, Mark.
I see that. I just wanted to ask
Sorry,
if
oh.
anybody in the room here has had lucid dreams.
So that's not what my hand's about. So
I know. No, it's all right. I'll come back to you, Meryl, in a minute. I just want to see a show of hands physically. If anybody here has had lucid dreams where you become aware of the fact that you're dreaming while you're actually doing it.
Oh,
Okay. So yeah, at least half of you. That's great. But have any of you had an experience that would be characterized by the delta state where you're in deep dreamless sleep? Oh, Mary has that. Oh my goodness, she's got to tell us about this. No, you have to turn yourself on there, Mary. Do
I don't
tell.
know. Probably I'm very lucky, but for example, always I sleep so comfortable and sometimes without no dream until morning, very deep.
Are you conscious during that time?
Yeah, few times I try and feel it, I'm so, deep sleeping. If I don't deep asleep and I don't consciousness on, morning I'm tired. I'm absolutely tired. I'm exhausted.
Right.
This is the sign I feel, okay, I didn't sleep deeply.
Right. That's where you go to regenerate your batteries.
Yeah, yes, that way, yes, I can. And sometimes I can sleep deep on the chair when I was younger, not now. Even not in the bed.
Interesting.
Yeah, I decided to sleep and I sleep it so easily. Yeah, but no, I can't. I can't do that. Yeah.
Okay, Meryl, you were going to ask or say something. What was it?
Oh, it was just a simple question before we got deep, and it's a very simple question that you probably have already answered, but I don't remember you answering it. What's the difference between soul and spirit?
Oh my God, that's a big question. I think we're going to have to leave that on the back burner for now until we get to a future class, because that's a big topic.
Okay, because I
I-
noticed you've got theta is soul and delta is spirit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a particular understanding that you could share with us right now from your perspective?
No, I don't know what the difference is.
Okay. Well, if I can prevail upon people to just sort of, what can we say, live with the uncertainty for a little while longer, maybe we can clear it up a bit later.
Okay.
Now, Bill, you were kind of waving your fingers. Were you just exercising, or did you want to say something?
No, I'm not much of an exerciser. No, it just occurred to me that, like, you know, there are times, and I think for probably most of us here, where you're being communicated to when you're asleep. You know, something or someone is communicating something to you when you're asleep. And I think that for that to happen, you have to be in some kind of a state. Maybe you didn't purposefully get there by meditating, but you have to fall into a state where you're receptive to that. And so in that sense, I'm thinking maybe about everybody here has been at that state, but not aware of their awareness.
Mhm. Well, there's something that one of the transpersonal psychologists by the name of Charles Tart came up with. He called it state-specific consciousness.
Yeah.
And so that means that the same kind of thing you're just talking about, Bill, that you'll be aware of being communicated to at that particular level. But when you come back to your waking self, the chances are very good that most of that will be gone, because you're almost a different person until you've worked on meditating and unifying all those portions of yourself so that you have that constant consciousness that Wilbur's talking about, where you can easily transfer from one body, as we'll talk about, to the other without having to forget everything that you just learned over there. Does that make any sense? So that's why we typically don't remember dreams. And often, you know, if you have a so-called big dream, there's something meaningful being conveyed to you, but often you'll forget it when you wake up, or you'll only have a little glimpse of it. You know something happened, but you can't really articulate it. So did you want to come back on that at all, or?
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot more common that occurs, but I think there are times when we are startled into a reality and something is communicated with us, and we take that with us into the next day. You know, I've had that experience multiple times, and I don't think I'm that special.
Well, I have to say that it's probably your receptivity and how much you hold on to what you're being given is probably a symbiotic relationship. It's partly you, but it's also the sender, and their need for you to remember it. So they'll ramp up the symbolism or something to make it really crystal clear so that you'll remember it as you come forward. That's just my guess, but I have a feeling that's possibly true. Jack, you've been waiting patiently for 5 minutes here. What are you thinking
Oh,
about?
no worries. I'm enjoying the conversation. I have a question mark about this dreamless sleep state.
Mhm.
Now, normally in the dreaming state, you're conscious. So in the dreamless sleep, are you supposed to be conscious, or does this indicate a higher state of consciousness than the dream sleep? What's the dreamless sleep all about? I know they have that in Hinduism also, but what's your understanding of are you supposed to be conscious, or like Mary says, you go to sleep and you're not conscious of anything till you wake up the next morning? Is that I don't think that's what's meant by dreamless sleep, is it?
Okay, Mary, what are you going to say?
No. I'm conscious, absolutely. For example, something very funny in my life. If a small noise, I wake up and again asleep completely. In few seconds, I realize what's going on and sleep again. That was a joke for my boys when they were teenager and they came late. When they put a key in the home door, I wake up and I say the name, and my son said, when I'm coming upstairs, you are sleeping. I say yes, because I'm comfortable. This is for me, and it's a fun for funny for all my family. But I am, and right away I'm sleeping. I don't know. That is me.
Well,
I don't know. That's really, I'm conscious. I know what's going on, but I'm completely gone.
Jack, as Mary was saying a few minutes ago, she's getting in touch with that source of energy that she needs in order to be able to regenerate for the next day.
Yeah.
So we're plugging into a source that isn't accessible to us in regular REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And it's, to me, as we're talking about it, it's as if the barriers between your deepest self and the environment that you're in are completely let down where you're in deep dreamless sleep. When you're dreaming, there's still a little bit of you there that can interfere with your environment, that is filtering, if you like, what you're receiving. But when you finally get to the stage where you're not dreaming anymore, but you're still sleeping, I think that's when there's a direct connection. You're plugged right into the electricity that you need. And it doesn't have to be a long time. So the researchers say it can only be a short period of time. But if you don't get it, you really know it the next day. Does that help at all? Or I don't know about higher and lower. I mean, obviously Wilbur is thinking it's a more exalted state, but I haven't developed consciousness of that, so I can't say. But I know in Buddhism it's revered. Okay, did you want to respond to that, Jack? Or
Well, this is so individualistic in a way. In my own, I have a very active dream life, which started a new stage just a few years ago, and I've been reading on Facebook that other seniors are saying the same thing. And I'm thinking, my response was, it's a preparation for the next world. My refreshment, if you like, and I rarely ever wake up refreshed. I don't know what that is, but the refreshment that I get comes after the dream. So I know the dream is supposed to clear out the brain. This is what I've read, like it acts sort of as a clearinghouse for what you've accumulated, and then the dream kind of sweeps it out or sweeps it clean. Because I've noticed when I sleep, that it's after I dream that I feel what refreshment I do experience. But I did have a very strange experience a few years ago that I don't know how to explain. It was totally unique. It's never happened to me before in my entire life. Usually I get up several times a night and visit the washroom because I'm drinking, which I need because I sleep with my mouth open and my mouth gets dry and all that. But on this one night, it was totally amazing. I didn't wake up until the next morning, and I haven't done that in I can't tell you how many years. And I don't recall having one dream during that time. So that was very, very atypical for me. And I have no way to explain it. I can't explain it because it's very atypical of my experience. Like I'm up easily 4 or 5 times a night. But for some reason on this, I think it was meant to teach me that there are states in the soul that we normally and I think it'd be interesting to come back to Meryl's question about soul, mind, and spirit. We should throw the mind in there, Meryl, just to make it complicated. This is being discussed quite a bit on Facebook among the Baha'is right now, that very question. Now I forgot what I was going to say. I always do that. I get lost in my own digressions. But anyway, yeah.
Okay.
So that's how it works for me.
Okay. So I'm curious to hear what Heather has to say, and then Bill.
Just one short thing is I've been looking at Seven Valleys this week, informed by what we've been talking about here with dreams, and there's a lot about dreams in Seven Valleys. The second thing has to do with falling asleep and awareness. That's why I'm having trouble with this whole dreamless sleep state, because if I'm falling asleep and I'm starting to dream, and then I realize I'm falling asleep, I wake up. And then I have to fall asleep again. It's like you have to like let your waking ego go before you can come into a dream state, in my experience anyway.
I think that's one of the reasons there's so much emphasis placed on lucid dreaming in the literature at the moment, because that's where you get to practice, if you like, being conscious during the dream state. And as you become more and more familiar with how it works, I presume then that sense of the barrier between waking consciousness and sleep may become more porous. And so you can slip in there without losing consciousness, which is a skill that you'd have to practice many times, I think.
But when you wake up, sometimes when I'm waking up and I'm having a dream, I'm conscious I'm having a dream, and I'm thinking, I should remember this dream. This is a really good dream to remember for some reason or other.
Yep.
So it's like on one end of sleep, it doesn't seem to work well for me, but it does on the other end of sleep.
So technically, that means that you're not very good at hypnagogic states, which are before you're sleeping, or that transition into it, but you're better at the hypnopompic, which is coming out of it. So you could put that on your resume if you need to. Well, interesting. That's you would think you'd be the same in both transitions, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but it's not.
Okay. Weird. Okay, I see Belinda's hand, but I'm going to go to Bill first and then Belinda second.
Yeah, I was, just, I suppose without any evidence that we all fall into just about every state known to man, including what Ken Wilber has been describing, and that the difference is Ken Wilber can demonstrate control, that is the ability to bring himself to that state. And persistence, that's the ability to stay in that state. Whereas we're, it's kind of like if I want to go to Dallas, I can find my way there directly in the most, bring myself there. But I could also just wander around aimlessly at some point, wander into Dallas. And the difference, so I think we all experience these states, maybe rarely, or maybe more than we think. Maybe we don't, but I think our minds and our souls are like the rest of nature. They're self-correcting, and if we need to be able to go to a state, to a place that helps us to heal, we typically will find our way there, whether we have control over it or not.
I think you're right that there is that's really what distinguishes, is it the degree of control that an individual has over their own states, and that can be expanded to altered states of consciousness too. That Wilbur is going to make the point that we're all experiencing these things, seemingly without reason, just almost, well, I guess maybe to give us a sense of our potential capacities. But you can't say to yourself, okay, I'm now going to enter samadhi. Not happening for most of us. We haven't developed the control that he has. Belinda, what are you thinking about?
Go ahead.
Okay. I thought I had it articulated. Now I'm not sure I do.
Well, give it a shot anyway.
There were several things. One of them is Ken Wilber demonstrated that he could reach this state and hold it for a number of days. And then he says something along the lines of, this isn't something that is special to him. Everybody has it. What was special to him was that he got there, or he did whatever was necessary to uncover the experience of that so that he could experience it and talk about it. Now, when I stop and think about it, he put in an enormous amount of time, energy, and effort to do that.
Yep.
And most of us don't have the option in our lives to do that. So it's kind of, for me, sufficient that I know somebody somewhere could do it. But it's out of reach as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I relate to that.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
I think David wanted to say something too.
yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Baha'u'llah says that, while you're dreaming, your physical body, is on the bed, but actually the dream is somewhere else.
Yeah.
And also in a different time zone sometimes.
Yeah.
So
And yeah.
So you'll see it happen in real life 10 years from now.
Yeah, well, that's another aspect of it.
Or
Because we as you know, there are different kinds of dreams. And one of them, okay, I'll just give you an example. I had a dream many years ago, way back in around 2003. And that dream was that Belinda and I were studying. But Belinda was at a higher level, like in a different, she was up here and I was down here. And that actually came about. That actually in our waking state, in our physical lives, that actually did happen. You know, and there was a big change, you know, in our lives at that point. What I'm trying to say is, as you know, we can have dreams that are predictions, so to speak. And something will happen sometime in the future. There are other dreams that don't amount to much of anything.
Most of them.
Yeah. But this is what Burkholz says. For me, I think the dream, I think it's very important. Let me give you one more example.
David, let's not. I'm a little conscious of the fact that I still have more material to cover, and I don't want to get too distracted just on the issue of dreams. That's a huge topic on its own.
Yes.
So let's not go there tonight, okay? If you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to be sharp with you. I'm just conscious of the evidence that I've gotten from people last week, where they said we need to cut discussions off sometime a little earlier than I was doing last week, that we need to make forward progress. So anyway, let's try and do that. So far we've just been talking about the upper left and the upper right quadrants, which are related to the individual. Now I want to show you, come back to sharing my screen here. Let's see, this one, I think. Yeah. Here's a little bit more detailed version of the quadrants. So down here in the lower left, we have the we section, which is culture and worldview. And down in the other quadrant, it's the social system and the environment. This is what's physically visible, what you can touch, it's tangible. So you'll recall that Wilbur was known as the brain in high school when he was growing up. Later, he came to realize that it is important for him to exercise all the major levels and dimensions of his human body mind: physical, emotional, mental, social, cultural, spiritual. And that's what he's trying to capture in this diagram. They're all important. So this is the fundamental idea behind what he calls integral practice. The goal is to unfold all the various potentials of the body-mind until the body-mind itself unfolds in emptiness. And the entire journey is a misty memory from a trip that can never have occurred. So in his particular case, he chose weightlifting to exercise his upper right quadrant. He mentions in one taste that he lifts weights for an hour or so each day. So this photo shows the result. And he was in his 40s when this was taken. So this is hardly the typical image of an intellectual, but it does give you a sense of his willpower and his commitment to his ideas. So if any of you are interested in exploring integral practice, Wilbur co-authored a book in 2008 called Integral Life Practice, a 21st century blueprint for physical health, emotional balance, mental clarity, and spiritual awakening, all together. So ILP, as he calls it, includes 4 core modules for the body, the mind, the spirit, and the shadow, and 7 additional modules that people can select from. Now, let me just show you a matrix of this. So on the left-hand side, you have the core. So here are the body, mind, spirit, and shadow. And then these are some of the extras that are available to work on, depending on your personal needs. So there's integral ethics, integral sexual yoga, work, transmuting emotions, integral parenting, integral relationships, and integral communication. So you'll also see down below, there's a statement here about gold star practices. These are the ones that they recommend, and they have these little stars beside them. You can see all the way down. So these are really important in those particular fields. So that's, if you want to actually practice not just meditating, but building your body up or building your relationships or whatever you feel needs work, this is a fantastic way to zero in on that and actually do things. They have specific exercises given to everybody. So I want to talk about the fourth turning. One of the reasons Wilber chose to focus on Buddhism in The Religion of Tomorrow, his latest book, is its willingness to evolve its forms of belief and practice over the centuries. As he says, any spiritual system that wants to stay current and up to date needs to continue to expand its own teachings and include these new truths as they come into being, which is what the Baha'i Faith is trying to do, learning from its experience, right? We're having reflection meetings every, couple of months or so to find out whether we're on the right track, whether we need to modify what we're doing in order to have a bigger impact. So there have been 3 such updates in Buddhist history, known as the 3 turnings of the Wheel of Dharma or Ultimate Truth, which we discussed at some length in our part 3 on Buddhism. It's been close to 3,000 years since Gautama Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and arose with his enlightenment. This was the first great turning of the Wheel of Dharma, now generally believed to be represented by the Theravada school from Sri Lanka, and thought to contain the historical Gautama Buddha's original teachings. 1,200 years later, the genius philosopher sage Nagarjuna founded the second great turning of the wheel, which emphasized the emptiness realization. It's represented by the Madhyamaka school. Now, 400 years after that, the half-brothers Asanga and Vasubandhu turned the Wheel of Dharma for the 3rd time by focusing on the Buddha nature, which is represented by the Yogacara view. Some Buddhists consider the wondrous developments of Tantra, especially as pioneered in the great Nalanda University in India from the 8th to the 11th centuries of the Common Era, as a 4th turning of the wheel. But this is not universally accepted among Buddhists. But even if Tantra is agreed upon, it has been close to 1,000 years since something profoundly new has been added to Buddhist Dharma. So here's the graphic with the turnings as they are. So here's number 1 with the Buddha himself. Nagarjuna is the 2nd. These 2 half-brothers were the 3rd. I've put this in gray for Tantra. We're not sure if it's actually a 4th or not. And now we come to this last one, which is what Ken Wilber is offering as a suggestion to Buddhism and to all other world religions. Wilber believes that all the world's religions could use a tune-up in terms of their relevance. What he is doing in this large volume of his, The Religion of Tomorrow, is featuring one religion as a concrete example of the benefits to be gained from his theoretical model. So I need a reader, and I'm hoping Lori can do that for me. Number 17.
I'm not suggesting that Buddhism is somehow superior or more advanced. and thus more open to this. In fact, as only one example, there are already a dozen books in print using exactly the same framework I will be introducing here to create a similarly futuristic Christianity. So there is no particular bias involved here. I believe any of the great traditions could be used as examples. Ken Wilber, The Religion of Tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. So whether Buddhism actually welcomes a fourth turn or not, of course, depends upon Buddhism itself. But as the years stretch on and it increasingly becomes longer than 1,000 years since new truths have been added in a new turning, the more likely it becomes that Buddhism itself will be seen as obsolete, out of date, out of touch, and outmoded. Alan, could you read this last number 18?
Sure. This would be a disaster, not only for any great tradition that doesn't take the leap, but especially for Buddhism, which contains perhaps the world's most sophisticated and stunning understanding of meditation of any tradition, anywhere, anytime.
Okay. So clearly Wilber is seeking to update Buddhism, to preserve its strengths while exchanging its centuries-old worldview for a fresh, modern, postmodern, even integral worldview. In short, he feels it is time to transcend and include its old-fashioned perspective, which one that is, as he says, more inclusive, more comprehensive, and more complete, as he puts it in the subtitle. Okay, so that, my friends, is the end of our 5th class on Wilber as a Buddhist. So I'm going to throw the floor open here. I see we had a chat item. I better look at that. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, we've already talked. That was Heather's point about the Valley of Wonderment, talking about dreams. Quite correct. Oh, we've got hands up. Okay, so I see first Bill and then Harold. So Bill, take it away.
Yeah, I just have a question. It seems to me that we're always looking at how does this relate to Baha'i perspective of God, and I'm just wondering, do the Buddhist or Ken Wilber, is it possible that they're simply talking about and looking into and becoming tuned into God's creation and the nature of the universe, and they're not looking, they're not claiming or getting that close to God, and that may be why it seems like a lot of people think that Buddhism is somewhat godless. But it just seems to me like they've done a very, very good job of intensely penetrating the secrets of the universe, the secrets of God's creation. But at the same time, why would we have to assume that somehow that's supposed to bring us closer to God, or that they're closer to God than another religion might be?
Well, I think what they're doing is in that penetration of reality, they are recognizing God all the way through it, more and more profoundly. They're seeing that there's, well, in Baha'i terms, that the world is an emanation from God. The two, the manifest and the unmanifest, are intertwined. Form and the formless inhabit everything. They're so close together, you can't tear them apart. So they've come to some very profound understandings, it seems to me, or realizations, if you like, And I don't have any problem thinking that what they're revealing is what I would understand as a Baha'i to be God in some way. We could have a discussion about that. I'm not sure how they themselves would handle that. But Wilbur's writings are littered with references to God or to the spirit. You can't avoid them. They're everywhere. So I'm suspecting that this idea that Buddhism is godless is betraying our lack of understanding of what Buddhism is really saying. That we're so locked into a particular concept of God that we see that they don't have that particular concept, therefore they're godless. But what we really are being challenged to do is to give up that particular limited version of what God is, expand it quite significantly, and see whether that's closer to what Buddhism has been saying all along. My suspicion is it's very close. Okay, Harold, what are you going to tell me?
You know, the idea that Buddha is associated with the least developed form of Buddhism, to me seems extremely off base.
It's not true. Buddhism itself is going to say that all three of them were actually made manifest during his lifetime, but that the Buddhists who were following him were not ready for the most part to handle that. So later, these other developments were unpacking writings that he had given to select groups during his own lifetime. So they're not new. It's just an unveiling of things that people weren't ready for early on.
Okay, if that's true, if you're interpreting Wilbur and Buddhism correctly, he should give a little more attention to Buddha in Buddhism, if what you're saying is true. So in other words, those are the first turning, the second turning, the third turning, the fourth turning, the fifth turning, which Wilbur is offering, are developments, are updates and developments. Okay.
Unfoldments even.
Unfoldments. So he says there could be equivalent unfoldments, say in Islam or Christianity, right? And I was, thinking of Baha'is. We do think that learning takes place, and there's epics, and we have various terminology for developmental stages.
For sure.
Okay, you're saying you see, here's why I don't quite buy this. He doesn't say much about the Buddha station or the status of Buddhist teachings. I haven't found that in Wilbur. In other words, he's sort of teaching, it's a Buddhism without Buddha. He doesn't really understand the realm of the manifestation or the station of I don't see evidence of it.
And that's one of the problems I had with deciding whether he's a Buddhist or not. You remember I was having some trouble deciding that issue?
Yeah, that's right. And see, related to this is something else missing. I'd call it covenantal. So a lot of what Wilbur's describing is almost like spiritual Olympics. How long can you sleep dreamlessly? These are almost like events that you would train for. He literally trains, right? He trained his body. He trained his mind. He has a whole system of training. And I think religion is about covenant. It's about you find a divine source or an ultimate reality of some kind, and you try to align yourself with it. You feel devoted to it. You feel morally obligated to bring its value into the world. This looks very psychologistic to me, and I invent terms for what I think I see. It's very inward looking, and it's evaluating. It's also very American. I was born in that country, so I have a right to say I see something different now that I live in Canada. He's developing the individual. It's sort of like in overdrive, an attempt to develop the individual in all capacities. And is that making a better world? I think religion is about saving the individual and saving the world. And we should never separate them, the I and the we, so to speak.
And that's why he has the quadrants.
Yeah, I understand. To be complete, he has to make that chart. I guess I'm talking about the thrust of this movement is about individual development, mostly developing consciousness and moving up the scale of difficulty and complexity.
But for what purpose?
I don't know I think the purpose is individual development, as near as I can tell. Individual development. Anyway, that's what I think I see. That's why it's not a religion. A religion is about social transformation as much as about individual salvation and transformation. But people can bump it in a social transformative direction. Like we found that out. There are books written in that realm.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out Wilbur. So my focus is how is he thinking? How does he tick? And what is his North Star, so to speak? And it looks like he really has analyzed consciousness. So this is where he's like an Einstein of consciousness.
In fact, he was called that.
Yeah. I can see that label. Yeah. Okay, sorry, talk too much. Sorry.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to keep that in mind as we go forward to see whether or not he does broaden it at all, or whether he's still focusing on the individual. Okay, Meryl.
Okay, a question. In your turnings of the wheel thing, you've got the fifth one, waking up and growing up, Ken Wilber.
Yeah.
Is that similar or the same type of stuff that he's talking about in his ILP, Integral Life Practice?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Different labels for those. Yeah.
So that's the same stuff. Okay, and then the other thing, or another is it the same stuff question, is when you were talking about formless and form, and what was the other thing you said? Oh yeah, manifest and unmanifest. Is that anything like when you talk about something being like in a realm that's beyond the physical realm, like that's not like that you can hear, see, touch, etc. Like, or that it's energy, or that it's ethereal, or are those all the same kind of thing, or is like, do we need different words for all this, or like?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
I
can you
think
help
so.
me with that?
Well, I think Wilbur would talk about sort of he does talk about a spectrum of consciousness that goes from the most gross level, physical reality, all the way up through many, many different shades, if you like, of materiality, becoming increasingly ethereal, and eventually arriving at a place which is formless.
Right, increasingly ethereal, and then formless. Like, you were talking about dreams, and I've had experiences, and I don't know what you call them. They're not dreams, but there's something. Oof. Anyway, I don't know what you call them.
This is one of the problems about that type of consciousness. We don't have very much vocabulary developed in the West for this stuff. It's really hard for us to articulate.
Is visions what you're getting at? Visions that are not dreams?
That's what I'm wondering. Like, in other words, there's a symbolic content, but there's a truth to it, like a reality to it. Like it's like you sort of know something is true, but you kind of know it through a symbol, if you know what I mean.
Intuition.
Something like that, maybe.
Well,
This is it. I don't know. I don't have the vocabulary.
Well, it's an interesting challenge that this type of thing forces upon us to develop a vocabulary, a communal shared vocabulary that we'll all be able to identify with. That's one of the things he says about a religion like Buddhism, for instance, where they have, for thousands of years, they've had communities of people who checked each other's experiences against each other. All these subtle things that we don't have vocabulary for, they have an enormous range of terms for.
Right.
That they've worked out together.
Where do we find terms for our stuff? So we
Well,
can talk about it.
In groups like this.
Oh.
We have to, there's certain hard work in front of us to do that.
Okay.
It has to be valuable to us, or we wouldn't spend any time on it.
Right.
But in the meantime, one of the things I'm doing is taking a look at what Buddhism is talking about. What is the gift that they have to offer humanity in terms of all that vocabulary in their different languages? And we've got some very good translators, for instance, from Tibetan, who can give us a pretty sharp sense of what those terms mean, how they're different from each other. So that can be a finger pointing at the moon, if you like, give us a sense of direction. And now maybe we'll incorporate some of those in our own understanding, or maybe we'll have to create new ones. But as a society, that kind of thing has to be important enough for more than just a few of us to focus on. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, like artists. Oh no, this is getting too wide. Ooh. Oh, sorry, skip that. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, artists are involved in a creative process. They're some of the canaries in the minds, right? They pick up things earlier than most of us and convey it to us in symbolic ways.
Right.
And then we try and figure out how to say what they're indicating to us in words. That's where the problem is, because we don't have the vocabulary.
Right.
Anyway, that's a big task. Thank you very much for giving that to us, Meryl. We'll see how we do. It's a long-term thing. Okay, Lori, what's your thought?
I was just thinking about Wilbur and Buddhism and everything, and more or less, we're told to pray and meditate in the Baha'i faith, and it must be for a reason. And I think that the development of that is really necessary. We don't just naturally know how to meditate. So I find this quite useful. And, until the majority of individuals are more spiritually evolved, we're not going to have peace or unite the world. So I think this is really, really necessary, and just part of what we see as Baha'is, but very necessary. And the second thing is I was involved in a long sort of program for people who have insomnia, and it's offered by OHIP, actually. So it's 6 weeks long, and you learn a lot about sleep. It's cognitive behavior therapy, but it's based on this book, Say Goodnight to Insomnia, the 6-week program. But one thing at the very end, it says the power and biology of faith. And so I think when we're improving our sleep, we're walking down the path that Wilbur goes down, because we all get there partially. But it says just quickly that Dr. Herbert Benson of Harvard Medical School believes that religious beliefs and prayers may be health enhancing because they elicit the relaxation response. In fact, he believes that the tendency for humans to engage in religious beliefs and prayer may be encoded in our physiology for that evolutionary reason. So consider finding and exploring a suitable religious beliefs. By doing so, you will reduce stress and improve sleep and health and the states that you're able to get to that we've heard described. So I just see everything sort of melding together.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So did it cure you?
No, but what we're trying to get to is Mary has very good sleep efficiency. So she's and it's relieving her stress and developing her levels of Ascent, all like that. And so there's many things that they go over, you know, they give you all these tools about how to do that. Yeah. And certainly the relaxation response and meditation is part of that program, as well as wearing orange glasses 2 hours before bedtime so you can increase your melatonin naturally, that kind of thing. So it was actually, it's a very good program if people have problems a bit with insomnia. The doctor can refer you and they call you the next day and OHIP pays for it. But you're really committed. It's a heavy program. You have to be really committed.
Well. So Mary should consider putting on a course on how to sleep quickly and naturally.
Yes, her sleep efficiency is absolutely fantastic. So she's getting a lot of work done every night.
I think it's time to share, Mary.
Yes.
Oh, she's got her hand up. I don't know. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, one comment. The only things after finish this session, probably in 1st of January, we can arrange a night and we can talk about that. I love to talk about that. It's a very interesting subject. Okay, if you like it, we can do it. About vocabulary, you know, in whole my life, you had a word of joyful, okay, in the English vocabulary, but we don't have a sadful. And for me, that's a new vocabulary. And I use always, I say, I'm completely sadful. How can I be joyful and cannot be sadful? You know, and of course, some people, they laugh at me, but we don't have this vocabulary. I say, okay, this is my vocabulary. Something when you say about vocabulary, we can make it. We can go to that point to make a vocabulary.
That's what we have to do.
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's a good point. Okay, Sai.
Well, I just wanted to throw in a line that came to me while I was listening, and I thought it was, see what people think. Goes that babies are actually more conscious than we are. I thought that was pretty interesting because they're not encumbered by all the things that we pick up as. So I thought that was kind of neat. And I just wanted to jokingly say to Meryl that if you run out of words, you can always switch to metaphors.
So it's interesting, though, that you make that point about babies. It's often said that they come trailing clouds of glory from their point of origin. Wilber has delved into that quite a bit, quite deeply, and has come to the conclusion that it's not actually true that they have more consciousness than the rest of us. Their consciousness is only just beginning to evolve. So their light, if you like, is very dim. and very confined. But as you evolve over your lifetime, it grows and grows and grows and grows and becomes stronger.
Yeah, I think it's all, I think what they're kind of leaning towards is the habits that we form, and you know, as we grow, the habits that stick to us. Babies don't have them yet. I mean, yeah, but as we get older, the habits take over. Like I was surprised to find out that all of our actions, 40% of our actions are habit during the day. So I guess that's one thing. So we rely on our habits quite a bit.
Yeah.
Babies don't have them yet.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, as you get older, time seems to speed up, because you're not encountering novel situations nearly as often as you did when you were young. You weren't having to pay attention to the same way you used to, because it's all habitual, or a great portion of it. So you don't pay any attention, you just move on, and time just rockets by you. Okay, Bill.
Yeah, so when Meryl was talking about vocabulary, and you said something about when society comes to value this, then this will happen. And then Lori and Mary went on with about essentially an area of value, which if you expand it more broadly, would be mental health. And our society is rapidly progressing toward massive mental health needs, and rapidly starting to, I think, see the value of addressing mental health issues.
Yeah.
And this vocabulary is, is not only something that will happen as the need arises, and the need has arisen, but it's something that we should do whatever we can to make that happen, because this is one of the big challenges to humanity, is mental health, and it's a product of other challenges to humanity, as well as, of course, a biological thing. But if we can really ourselves as Baha'is, as people in this group, see the value of that, give it that level of value that it would have to be on top of these things, with the vocabulary and the ability to articulate what we want to say. Belinda often starts off with, not often, but sometimes says, I want to figure out how to articulate this, because she has the understanding, but even someone with her capacities is having a hard time pulling together the vocabulary necessary because it hasn't been developed in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, to me, the metaphor for finding the value that needs to be brought to solving humanity and resolving humanity's sufferings.
That's an excellent point, boy. Yeah, talk about relevant. And it makes me think, as you're speaking, one of the things I've always sensed from reading Baha'u'llah's writing specifically is that he's encouraging us to figure out what all the names and attributes of God are all about. They're in your face all the time. But do you really appreciate what he means, what the subtle differences are between those things? These are far beyond our experience, most of them. But we're being encouraged to come up where the air is finer, to learn how to appreciate those nuances, those subtleties, and to develop our ability to talk to other people about that. So it's very much in line with what you're just talking about, that it will affect people's mental health if they can start to appreciate what a loving universe it really is.
Yeah.
And that they're not alone. So, okay, Jack, I think you're next, and then Meryl would like to jump in here. Jack, you need to
You're
unmute.
muted, Jack.
Here's the great Wordsworth. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy, but he beholds the light, and whence it flows, he sees it in his joy. The youth, who daily farther from the east must travel, still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day.
Beautiful.
What's the name of that, Jack?
That's Wordsworth Odes how does it go? Odes of Immortality on Intimations of Childhood or something like that, where he's regretting
Growing up.
yeah, some of the beauties and some of the purities of the child, experience and all of that. It's almost a hint of reincarnation in that, but he does speak about God, that's for sure.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. That was beautiful. Just gorgeous.
Wanted to say that a lot of people don't know about Mary is this. Her family's been blessed because one of her ancestors was promised health by Abdu'l-Baha. You know, when Abdu'l-Baha was in the world, he would ask the friends, if you can imagine this, what they wanted when they left their pilgrimage. And Mary's ancestor, she can tell you who it was, asked for good health for the family. So so it's come down to Mary through the grace of Abdu'l-Baha. Right, Mary?
She's smiling. She's embarrassed. Okay, Meryl.
Okay, has anyone read this? The Shadow Effect by Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, and Marianne Williamson.
Not yet.
Illuminating the hidden power of your true self. And the whole book is about how our true self gets covered over by all this stuff, the shadow, like Jungian type shadow.
Yep.
And so maybe when people say that babies are close to the light because they haven't developed all that shadow stuff yet, they haven't started repressing stuff. But then as we grow, we grow more mature, but then we also develop all this shadow that clouds us. And anyway, this whole book is talking about how that sort of builds up, and then we have to figure out how to, use practices and so on to release shadow, like become more conscious and, instead of stuffing it down, which just makes it thicker.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about waking up and growing up. Actually, Wilbur has two other terms as well. One of them is showing up, and the other one is cleaning up. And the cleaning up refers to dealing with your shadow. So that gets a lot of airtime in his writing. So it's very important to do that. Meditation won't take care of it for you. It addresses a different part of you altogether. So there are practices that you can follow that will help you deal with your shadow issues.
And this too, like it's talking about, well, you need the awareness of it, and then you need to own it and not be afraid to look at it and all that kind of stuff.
And that's where you need friends or people who know about this stuff to help you. Yeah. Because it can be super painful.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, without a face, you having a problem with your video?
I have 3 computers surrounding me, and none of them are working at this point in time.
Oh, whoa.
Not so it's just the nature of how I frame reality. It's different from those guys who do the programming.
Okay.
And that's sort of what I was thinking along the lines. A lot of what has been said this evening has been, and previously as well, has been about the understanding that we bring to the world. Somehow we seem to use our brains to frame the world in a certain way.
Mhm.
It's based on past experiences, discussions that we've had. If you talk with a First Nations group, you'll find that their language and vocabulary is different, and they frame the world through their vocabulary.
Yeah.
So language is really important for culture. And we have, therefore, like all human beings, we must have a framework, which is our culture for seeing the world.
Mhm.
And it has nothing to do with the reality of the world necessarily. It is just we have seen the world in a certain way. We have been educated by our parents and our teachers and our friends to have certain things of value. And that's what we have built into a framework. And through that framework, we see the world. And what I think that a religion does, and this is different from the individual, is it builds a collective framework over time. So that what occurs in a religion that doesn't occur when an individual grows
Mhm.
is that the religion, through conversations with its membership, you'd mentioned attributes and focusing on discussing about attributes, leads to a framework of understanding of the world.
Mhm.
And that framework of understanding, I think, is both the gift of religion and the goal of religion.
Mhm.
That we build a different framework, one that has nothing in it but peace. There's no concept of going to war, organizing a group of people to fight each other. I mean, who does that? It's just not part of what we do in this reality. I've never heard of that before. At some point in the future, the young'uns will be saying that to each other. And they'll also have a deeper understanding of attributes and qualities, stuff that we don't have at this point in time. But it leads me to question, it's wonderful to have the Wilburs, but can we build their framework collectively that they're offering into something that we would call a religion?
No.
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of eclectic in my interests. I like to cherry pick things from many, many, many different places when I feel that there's something that I can use. So maybe I'm a utilitarian or a pragmatist. I don't know. So to me, I'm not necessarily buying everything that Wilbur has to say, but what I'm doing is looking for things that we can use.
Mhm.
How is he helping us to develop ourselves and our community? That's what is very important in this kind of a course, I think. What can we take away from this? I'm not taking the reincarnation part. No. There is several things that I'm not going to take, but there are a lot of things that nobody else has articulated the way he has. Anyway, so Belinda, you're being very patient there. What are you hoping to say here?
Okay, we were talking about vocabulary, and sometimes when we're reading about this stuff or discussing about this stuff, vocabulary from other languages comes into it.
Mhm.
We've encountered that when we were talking about what's his name, the Aurobindo,
Yep.
and to some extent with Wilbur, but not so much. The problem with taking a term like, say, Atman, from another language, another culture, another vocabulary, is that it doesn't help. I've spoken with a yoga guru, and he says he doesn't like to use the word soul, but he uses it from time to time. And when I asked him, like, well, what is the soul? He actually couldn't tell me. He implied at some point that Atman was a better word, but it doesn't mean anything to me because I'm not in that linguistic context.
Yep.
And many of our words have meaning because we are accustomed to the context in which they occur.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about a wide context and also a more narrow context of actual sentences. So we take a word or an expression from about Buddhism, about some state, and they give us a term like, I can't even think of one right at the moment because I just brush them away. I don't know what it means. And it doesn't help because I don't know what it means. So it does seem like we have to develop the language, the terms within our own language. You know, you were talking about developing a vocabulary for discussing these things, but we have to find some of that vocabulary from within our own language context for it to be any help.
Yep.
Just a comment. The other thing I wanted to say about Wilbur is maybe he's pushing the fifth turning. If he had, and I guess I'm speaking to Harold here, if he had relied more or referred more to, say, Buddha in a confidential way, so to speak, I think all he would have done was return what he's saying to a more limited context.
Mm-hmm.
And he probably is trying to take the teachings of the Buddha into a broader context so that they're more accessible to other people.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And in fact, since I guess the next turning of the wheel is actually Baha'u'llah or something like that, and it's real. It's yeah. There really isn't too much he can say about that, but he can certainly open doors and provide some degree of maybe even vocabulary for us to understand a bit about what's going on. And yeah, he does tend to focus on the individual, but he does at least give a nod, more than a nod, to the social context.
Yes, he does.
And I agree with Harold there. That's really, really important.
Yeah.
When somebody said something about when there's a majority, I don't think it's going to happen very soon. There is something like, it's called
The tipping point?
critical mass.
Ah, yeah.
And so you don't need a majority, you need a critical mass.
Usually thought to be 10%.
Possibly, I don't know. But anyway, it's just, I don't see it around the corner, that's for sure.
But it's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, in the case of Buddhism, you have a situation where enlightened Buddhists have admitted the possibility of evolution within their own religion. And evolution is not something that most of humanity thinks of as evolving. So to that degree, Wilbur is waking us up to the fact that, yes, indeed, religion does evolve. But because he's referring to the four turnings within the Buddhist context, that's all within one religion. What he now needs to do is broaden that to realize that progressive revelation includes all of the religions. evolving from one to the next. That's the next step in that process. So he's helping us get there, I think. Well, if that's it, I think we finished our evening. How are you feeling? Well,
Stimulated as usual.
okay.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I hope that's how people feel. Alan's giving me a big thumbs up. That's great. Oh, well, I guess we're ready to hit winter now. So we're going to come back in a week and see how everybody has fared. And we'll talk about the next subject, which is, let me see what the title is I've given it. I've been holding off giving you the detailed outline. The next one is religious evolution, strangely enough. So I'm several classes ahead of where we're at the moment in my writing, but I was hoping to get the next 5 completed before I sent it out. But I think what I'll do is I'll just send you the outline for 6, 7, and 8. I'm working on 9 at the moment. I've got 10 already done, and then 11 and 12 will fall naturally after that. So maybe just to give you a heads up of where we're going, I'll send that out to you tomorrow. Anyway, so that's it, folks.
Thank
Have
you.
yourself a wonderful
you.
evening.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you all.
Not
Bye,
God,
bye.
why in your storm?
Night, everyone.
Take care of yourselves.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.
Excellent.
And I think Eva's in St. Lucia. So hello to Eva in St.
Is
Lucia.
she?
Oh.
Yes.
All I could see
Hi,
is light.
Eva.
Yeah. Haloed.
Is she here? Is that
Yeah.
here?
Eva's
Yeah.
reading here.
Yeah, that blinding light is Eva.
How come I can't?
That's right. That's
For some reason I can't see her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah.
she's
Eva,
very happy.
How are you? How are
Yes.
you?
She's very happy and she's meeting very interesting people.
Good.
The
Yeah.
islanders are fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Okay.
Oh, and I
Okay.
can't see you, but
Thank you.
anyway, I know you're there.
Yeah.
One of my
Thank you.
favorite
Please inform.
One of my favorite things is Lisa's cat, who I think
Yeah,
is-
no, I
who
watched.
knows how to meditate better than I do.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Relaxation.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love it when the cat comes.
Oh, that's
Thank you,
good.
Lisa.
We pair to
love
do
those
that.
cats.
You know, it's part of the program.
I try to get her to come in, but she doesn't always come, you know.
Yeah.
You have to pair and kibble.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Some piece I'm sure a piece of liver would go down well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stay safe. Stay safe, everybody.
Have a good
Yeah.
trip,
You
Lori.
too.
Have a
Yeah.
Hi, Lori.
Yeah.
Oh, have a good trip. Oh, are you going now?
I'm on the 26th of December. I'm going to BC.
Oh, BC. Okay, I was thinking of Haifa. Oh,
That's February.
Oh, you're going to Haifa, eh?
And-
Good for you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And when you
Well,
come back,
Let's hope
in
the
theory,
fly and land and don't get stuck on the tarmac.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
good night, everyone.
good
Okay,
night.
good
good
night.
night.
Good night, all.
Take care of
Take care.
yourselves.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.